Hey, welcome back, everyone. So some big stories to talk about tonight. We've been talking for a while now, saying that Trump may be releasing this new social network he's been talking about for a while, or his aides have been talking about for a while. He has actually made his own comments now, saying that they may be launching this, in his own words, soon. So I'll be talking about that, updates on it, what's happening with it. Also going to go into what's happening with Ron DeSantis in Florida and this new this new law they've passed, which makes it illegal in Florida for social networks like Facebook, Twitter, and others to deplatform politicians, including, say, Trump, including others. And remember, folks, where is Trump living right now? He's living in Florida. And so we'll go into that. I also want to talk a bit about the Wuhan laboratory, because it's back in focus. Anyone remember the documentary we published here last year, investigating the origins of the Wuhan coronavirus? We provided a lot of evidence suggesting that the virus very likely escaped from that Wuhan laboratory. We were, of course, called all kinds of names for it. People censored us for it. Facebook kicked us off for it. But folks, guess what? It seems to be the case now that that's where all the evidence is pointing. Even Dr. Fauci himself, who has some funky ties to that Wuhan laboratory, even he himself now is saying that, you can't write off a possible lab origin for this virus. And so I'll be going into that, a bit about what this means, talking about that. Also, 15 minutes towards the end, folks, we'll jump exclusively to Epoch TV. So about 45 minutes in, we'll jump over there. And so, folks, if you're not on Epoch TV, please get a subscription. I think you'll really like the content we have. It's our uncensored answer to YouTube. And so, again, great content there. I think you really like it. Now, that said, folks, as always, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I do watch the chat, actually, while I do these. And so you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. Also, if you have your own insights, be sure to share it in the chat as well, as we're going through the stories. And that said, folks, it's good to see you all as always. Yeah, Roseanne Dunn, yes, Fauci is involved. He's been called out quite a bit in the media lately. It's actually very interesting to watch where it's heading. Yeah. Hey, Linda Hayes, that was my first time being censored because I shared that video. Yeah, actually, anybody who shared that documentary we published on the origins of the virus that we investigated last year, anybody who shared that on Facebook got a little notice saying you shared false information. So, folks, for every single one of you who shared that documentary and got a notice from Facebook, guess what? You were in some ways defamed a bit by Facebook within that. And so here we all are. Every one of us was censored to some extent. Anybody who shared that video was censored. And so, but here we are, folks. All the information's out there. Yeah, Ryden, Josh, you're still a liar. Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing with the media, or the legacy media. They censored us for that. They attacked us for it. They wrote big hit pieces on us for it. They named me personally in some of those. They're not going to apologize for it, But I do think that everybody who shared that documentary, and we got around 100 million views on it across all platforms, everybody remembers, and that's what matters. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into the first story for the night. And again, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. Try to get to them around the halfway point. So first off, let's start with this social network and what's happening with Trump. Now, Epoch Times reports right here. It says, stay tuned. Trump says new social media website will be rolled out, quote, soon. This is what it says. It says former President Donald Trump suggested that his new social media platform will be launched soon, while noting that mainstream media outlets misreported traffic to his own website. Now, several weeks ago, Trump rolled out a social media-like section of his website called From the Desk of Donald J. Trump that allows him to post his statements. You might have seen his website, 45office.com. He has a couple now, actually. This is on donaldjtrump.com, the one he's using for this. They actually have a section on there where he's been posting his updates that looks a bit like Twitter. It looks a bit like a social network feed. Now, let's go into what's happening, though, with his talk of an actual social network. Now, it says here, right? Now, he rolled out this from the desk of Donald J. Trump. And it says here, right? describing his website as a, quote, temporary way of getting his message out. Temporary, right? That's the key word here. And Trump noted that, quote, it is a place where everyone can see my statements issued in real time and engage with the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again movement. And he said this is meant to be a temporary way of getting my thoughts and ideas out to the public without the fake news spin. Similar to the narrative he used on why he was using Twitter so much when he was president. Again, it was his way of communicating directly with the people. He could bypass the media, bypass chances of him getting quoted out of context, bypass them twisting his words around, even though they did it anyways, in order to communicate directly. He's saying the same thing now with his DonaldJTrump.com website. But he says this, but the website is not a platform. He said, it is merely a way of communicating until I decide what the future will be for the choice or establishment of a platform. You hear that? Not just the choice of a platform, but maybe even, he said, quote, establishment of a platform. And he added on this, right? He said, it will happen soon. Stay tuned. And so that's a pretty important point there. Now, his assistants, his aides have been saying for a while now that he was working on his own social network. This rumor has been going around for a while now, and again, spread by people close to Donald J. Trump, saying that he is going to be launching his own social network. Now, there was a lot of speculation on that. A lot of people were saying, well, is Trump saying this, or is it his assistant saying it? There was also talk about whether he'd go to, for example, Parler. There were rumors that he was actually in talks with them. The talks do appear to have fallen through, although who knows what the update is now. He was apparently in talks with them, according to the little bit of information we can get out. There was also talk that maybe he'll get on Mike Lindell's platform, the one that Mike Lindell was talking about launching. His platform is still not functioning the way that we thought it would. It doesn't have the social networking features that we thought yet. Currently, he's using it more as a way to get his investigative videos out, which is Frank Speak. So again, Frank is Mike Lindell's social media platform. It's not clear whether Trump's going to use that. Also, as we are speaking right now, Trump was trying to get back on Facebook, Twitter, these other platforms. It seemed like that could be a possibility. Their boards said that they would not allow him back on. Trump does seem to be indefinitely censored on those platforms. But what has just happened, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, just announced this new law that makes it illegal to deplatform politicians. Now, they have deplatformed Trump. The loophole within that is that Trump is currently not a politician, right? They could say he's a public figure, or as the former president, all right, as the former president, maybe he would qualify somehow within the boundaries of that law. We'll have to see. And so Trump's options for getting on a new platform are actually very limited. And when he says this, again, he's saying that his current platform, DonaldJTrump.com, is merely a way of communicating until I decide on what the future will be for the choice or establishment of a platform. Well, folks, his choices of existing platforms are very, very thin. Pretty much it's like Gab, Parler, or one of these other sites that very likely, if you were to get on it, may get censored. That said, Parler has been reinstated on the app stores, and so that is an option. We'll have to see if Trump gets on with that, or if he launches his new one. He does specifically say or establishment of a platform, and he's also saying it will happen soon. Now, the timing of this is also important to note, because Trump, as we're speaking right now, is just about to be launching his new Trump tour, right? His MAGA rallies. He has 4 different states lined up currently as we're speaking for MAGA rallies, which is leading up again to his campaigning for different senators and House representatives for the 2022 election. And so, folks, all of this is being rolling out right now. All of this is happening. And very soon we may have a new option for social media. Trump is a billionaire still, remember, and so he has the money to do it. Also, on this, in addition to this, Epoch Times reports that the Washington Post, Trump added that on his website on Monday also incorrectly reported about his DonaldJTrump.com website viewership. They said that pretty much Trump is saying that they did not properly represent the traffic that he's getting currently. He said, "We have not yet launched our own social media platform, but even the very basic site we have to post our statements has received 36.7 million views over the past month alone. And we're getting more traffic to our website now than in 2020, an election year," he continued to say. Meaning that people only going to his DonaldJTrump.com website just to see what he's saying, not necessarily to, participate in an online discussion, which a social network would be. He said just that site alone is getting 36.7 million views in just this last month. And that's a lot. That's a whole lot for any website. And he's again mentioning here, we have not yet launched our own social media platform in context of that, suggesting again that they are planning on launching a social media platform. Again, Trump's hinting at it here. People close to him said that they were working on it already. And again, he's stating again right here, again, suggesting it. And so, folks, we'll keep you all updated on this. We'll have to see what's happening with it. Again, not clear whether he's going to be launching his own or joining an existing one, but it does seem to be the case they're leaning towards making their own. All right, folks, we're going to go into a few more stories, but first, Crossroads is totally demonetized on YouTube. You might notice we don't have our super chat function, which was quite a blow to us, actually. Not necessarily because, folks really appreciate donations on here, but because it was useful for trying to keep track of comments. Unfortunately, we've been totally demonetized here. We don't have super chat. We don't have advertisements, but luckily we do have sponsors. And so tonight's episode is brought to you by American Hartford Gold. Again, folks, on that, with all the turbulence with the economy, the stock market, risks of inflation, multi-trillion dollars in government spending, China launching its digital currency, Bitcoin taking a big hit recently, and pretty much the entire global monetary system being turned upside down with risks of inflation, you can consider investing in an asset that's often stable, and that's also typically on the incline, and that's gold or silver. Now, American Hartford Gold is one of the highest rated firms in the country with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. They can have your gold and silver delivered right to your doorstep or into your IRA. To learn more about that, please check out the link in the description below. American Hartford Gold has provided us with a free 25-page information guide. So even if you're not looking to invest in gold or silver at this time, you just want to learn about it, check out the link we have in the description. You can get that information guide and learn a bit about how to invest in gold and silver. If you call them now, you can get up to $1,500 of free silver in all qualifying first orders. The phone number for that is 877-260-2764. You can also text Joshua to 65532. And again, big thanks out to American Hartford Gold for sponsoring tonight's show. All right, that said, folks, let's go to what's happening in Florida right now. Because in addition to Trump talking about launching his own social network, and Trump's been kind of not saying things very directly. He's not been saying things very directly. He's not saying directly whether he's going to run again in 2024, right? He is suggesting it. He's not saying directly, but he's deeply suggesting. He's not saying it's going to be launching a new social media platform, but he's deeply suggesting it. And at the same time, folks, some other stuff is happening alongside of this, which is, again, let's say, broader attacks taking place on big tech. Biggest thing happening right now is in Florida. Let's go into it. It says here, Epoch Times reports, DeSantis, that's Governor Ron DeSantis, signs bill to stop big tech censorship of Floridians. And folks, where's Trump living right now? Right in Florida. Now it says here, Epoch Times reports, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed into law a bill, the first of its kind in the United States, allowing Floridians to sue big tech platforms. Normally you can't do it because they're protected under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And I'll go into why this is significant with that in just a bit. Let's go over the story first. It says here, a number of free speech advocates, including Cuban and Venezuelan exiles, state senators, and deplatformed influencers, including like James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, stood behind DeSantis as he made the announcement at Florida International University on May 24th. Now, courts may award up to $100,000 in damages to an individual if a social media platform censors or shadow bans a user's account, deplatforms a user, or if it hasn't applied censorship or deplatforming standards in a consistent manner. In other words, folks, like if it's political-based censorship, like if they have a double standard, so on, right? According to the text of the bill. And Ron DeSantis said this. He said, "We will be the first state to hold big tech accountable." He said that at the press conference. Now, continuing a bit further into the story, it says this. The law also blocks big tech from deplatforming Floridian political candidates. The Florida Election Commission will impose fines, that's under the Florida Election Commission, in addition to its protections on the average citizen, right? This is the part specifically about deplatforming politicians. The Florida Election Commission will impose fines of $250,000 per day on any social media company that deplatforms any candidates for statewide office. The fine is $25,000 per day when deplatforming candidates for other offices. While Floridians have the right to block anyone, it's not the role of big tech to censor, said DeSantis. Now, a couple points on that. These are multiple issues, and so the ability to sue big tech, including Facebook, YouTube, others, for deplatforming you, is different from the one about politicians. And so each individual, right, whether it's me, whether it's any of you, if you're living in Florida, we'll have to see if other states adopt this, which will be big, right? Any state that, anyone who is deplatformed, if you live in Florida, can sue big tech. You can get up to $100,000 if you sue them. That is separate from the protections on politicians, which again is $250,000 per day, or $25,000 if they deplatform any candidates for other offices. Now, realistically, folks, that's a drop in the bucket. If you know, for example, if they have a political agenda and they want to censor someone, especially if it's a candidate, $250,000 a day is a drop in the bucket for them. A lot of YouTube channels might make that, you know, maybe in a few months if they're big enough and if they're not deplatformed. And so there's a possibility these platforms will still censor because they'll just take it on the chin and say, well, you know, losing a few $1 million is worth it for, you know, winning the political battle. They might try that. But if it's a mass censorship campaign, if it's targeting a large number of people, and if it goes to the courts and people start learning about what's actually happening behind the curtain, right? Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. When it comes to how they actually censor and deplatform people, that's going to be a very interesting discussion. Because every single case that is brought forward, whether it be by average citizens or by politicians or by candidates in Florida, any case that's brought forward is going to go through a court trial process. And through that process, we're going to be learning a whole lot about how these platforms censors people. And guess what, folks? As that happens, what else happens? Other states watch the evidence coming out. They see how it's done. Maybe even other countries watch how it's done. And guess what? Whether it's states, whether it's even other countries, because again, these are multinational corporations, they're probably going to start putting into place similar policies as this. This is not even just an American issue. This is a global issue. This is also a state-by-state issue. And so, folks, get ready for the floodgates to open when it comes to watching how these platforms censor people, learning about how it's done, and maybe to an extent ending some of the censorship. Now, the article continues a bit further in. It says this. If social media platforms are found to have violated antitrust laws, which is the third element of this, antitrust laws, which could be like they have a monopoly, which they do. Many of them do, right? They'll be restricted from contracting with any public entity. That antitrust violator blacklist imposes real consequences for big tech oligopolies. Bottom line, right? Oligarchy, oligopoly, like a government run by big tech, basically, is what he's suggesting. According to DeSantis, now the law will also require social media companies to be transparent about their content moderation practices and give users proper notice of changes to those policies. That's a huge issue. I'll go over that in just a minute. Now, according to Florida State, the new law will likely be able to withstand legal challenges. This is another important part, as it contains language that explains how big tech companies are different from other corporations, and that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act requires companies to act in good faith, something the governor accuses big tech of not always following. What does that mean as well? That means these companies will have it in every one of their interests to not allow these cases to actually be heard, especially by the Supreme Court. This means that even if they're sued in local courts in Florida, they will have every incentive possible, unless the courts get packed by political hacks, basically. Unless, again, there's a packing of the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court hears a case with this, especially around Section 230 protections, that's going to be a huge blow to these companies. What does Section 230 do? Basically, it protects big tech platforms from being sued for the content they post on their sites. Now, one of the big arguments of Section 230 is that they're platforms, not publishers. What does that mean? Basically, if you're running a social media website and you have hundreds of thousands, millions of people posting every single day, you may not have the ability to edit or censor or moderate every single post. If someone posts something criminal on there, like child trafficking or something like that, you can't necessarily catch all of it. A lot of that is up to, again, law enforcement doing takedown notices and so on. That's one of the big arguments with giving them this type of protection, that they can't moderate to an extent where they could be held legally liable for everything people post on it. Maybe people are pirating movies or something and post links on it. These sites would be dealing with hundreds or thousands of lawsuits daily without this protection. And so they were able to have this legal protection because of that, on the grounds that basically they don't have the ability to censor and to moderate types of content like that. But guess what? Many of these platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they've demonstrated over time the ability to moderate content like that, especially as they've demonstrated their willingness and ability to do it when it comes to political censorship, that they do censor people in ways that does seem to suggest severe political bias. Even Project Veritas has been publishing insider videos from these companies demonstrating their own admissions to technologies like this. And so, as we're watching this, folks, it's going to be interesting. These courts in Florida, as they begin to have lawsuits come in of people who are already deplatformed, very likely, and as new cases come about, these platforms are going to have every part of their interest to prevent those cases from going higher, meaning that maybe they'll make payouts to these individuals in Florida. But as the cases are exposed, whether or not they go to higher courts, we'll have to see. Whether or not they go to higher courts, the trial process is going to be exposing, this is where it gets interesting, going to be exposing these censorship practices of these companies. What does that mean? It means other states are going to be witnessing, right, testimony, evidence emerging of the type of censorship happening on these platforms. As they're witnessing this, they themselves, other states, may adopt similar policies. We have seen in the US a pattern happening where states are replicating policies. States are replicating policies around things just like this, especially Florida, Texas, and Arizona. Personal analysis, I think Texas and Arizona and maybe a few other states are very likely to follow very soon on policies like this if they can pass it legally. They may wait to see what the legalities are on it and how it's challenged. But very likely this isn't even going to be just a U.S. issue. This is probably going to be a global issue. Because funny enough, a lot of other countries, even very socialist countries actually, tend to not like big tech, especially American-led big tech. The European Union, a lot of countries were complaining for many years now, claiming that America has, a monopoly on internet infrastructure, on big tech. And they do have it in their interest to try to tax these companies. Australia has been very strong against Facebook, for example. Even African countries have been pushing back, like Uganda, pushing back against Twitter, for example, because they've seen this type of deplatforming taking place. And so this isn't just going to be a U.S. issue. the evidence that arises from these court cases with this is going to cause very likely a pretty big global shift. We'll have to wait and see what happens with it. But folks, this is a big issue. This goes very far beyond just Florida. All right, let's go over a little bit more, then we'll jump into some questions for the night. Real quick on this as well, just one more note on big tech censorship. The District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., is also suing right now Amazon for antitrust violations. Amazon, the company. It says here, the District of Columbia filed an antitrust lawsuit against online retailing giant Amazon, accusing the Seattle-based company of using its market power to harm consumers. Amazon is the world's largest online retail platform. As of May 25th, the company had a market capitalization of $1.63 trillion, bigger than some countries in the world. And according to the Wall Street Journal, was close to completing a deal to acquire MGM, the Hollywood movie-making studio. Again, Amazon Prime does have a video platform similar to Netflix, right? Now, Amazon, it says, unlawfully uses price agreements to stifle competition. And that's according to District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Attorney General Carl Racine, a Democrat who said that in a press release. Again, folks, interesting to see what happens with this. Also, there's talk now about net neutrality, for example, charging different providers like Netflix, like Amazon, for example, for traffic that they use, for bandwidth that they use on the internet. There's a lot to that. Maybe I'll have to do that in a separate episode because there's a lot to go into on that. But before we go to some questions for the night, let's go real quick into a bit. Actually, let's do questions first. Then we'll do some of this virus origin story. Then we'll jump over to Epoch TV after that. But I want to talk to you also about what's happening with this virus origin, because, folks, it seems to be the case that everybody seems to be suggesting now the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, very likely. Again, this P4 laboratory in Wuhan, China. And frankly, folks, the evidence is not lining up of the Chinese Communist Party and of the WHO trying to suggest otherwise. The World Health Organization's attempt to say that it did not come from one of these laboratories in China really fell through, right? We saw with their recent attempts to track the origin of the virus, they were not able to really prove anything solid. No government in the world seemed to have backed their findings, right? We never even really saw the findings of that investigation. Meaning, folks, they put everything they had into proving that it did not come from a laboratory, and they weren't able to do it. And so it does seem to be the case now. A lot of people are talking about, well, maybe it came from the laboratory. And where'd you hear that first? Or possibly first? Well, if you watch the documentary published last year, you probably saw all the evidence we have on that. All right, folks, before we jump into questions, we want to show you a real quick sneak peek of some of what we have going on at Epoch TV. We recently interviewed Alan Dershowitz. Great interview, folks. Let's jump into that now.
We're in a very, very dangerous situation now where the left, which has enormous influence on American universities, has enormous influence on the social media, has enormous influence on certain kinds of politics in the media, are trying to suppress free speech, and they're succeeding. We have to use the court of public opinion. We have to use the various other forms of media that are available to us. Look, we do not live in the Soviet Union, in Mao's China, in Castro's Cuba. We are much freer because we have independent sources of information. But some of the most important sources of information, particularly the social media, are today engaged in massive censorship. And that's not good for the country. It's not good for the Constitution. It's not good for freedom of speech.
All right, folks, one of the many interviews we have right now on Epoch TV. We just published the interview with Alan Dershowitz. Please check it out. And again, folks, that's Epoch TV, epochtv.com/Crossroads. You can also find the link to that in the chat and in the description. And folks, again, Epoch TV, it's $4.99 a month, right? The price of a California gallon of gas. And folks, it gets you a lot of exclusive content, a lot of our other shows actually too, some great programs on there. We have, for example, the show with Trevor Loudon talking about communist subversion in America, naming all the different groups and even individuals carrying out the subtle subversion of our systems. We have the Larry Eller show on there. We have, again, some of the shows with Tiffany Meyer, like Deep Dive, fantastic programs there, folks, and a lot more we're trying to get on right now. And so again, and also, folks, some great programs we're working on right here. So stay tuned for that. So again, folks, check out the link in the description for Epoch TV. Again, really appreciate your support. And in addition to getting all that great content, you'll also be helping us keep this show going. And so really appreciate it, folks. And again, think you'll like what we have going on there. Let's jump into some questions. First from Lug Puka. You said, Joshua, your new camera setup looks fantastic. The only problem is many of us miss you misreading your book titles. Yeah, it's just out of my reach, actually. I guess I can reach this one. Yeah, maybe if I have stuff to talk about with books, I can grab a few off the shelf and keep them closer to me. Just barely out of my reach. But yeah, now you have this nice blurred background, so you can't read the book titles as easily, I guess. Sacrifices, right? But yeah, I hope y'all like the new setup we have. We got a better camera setup. And looks a lot nicer, right? All right, let's see here. This is from Charles Burgess. He said, this is from Epoch TV. He said, Josh, your opinion on having National Guard control all parts of voting? Well, I mean, I know that's been suggested to some extent. Personally, I don't think it's a bad idea. You do have our National Guard troops, which in times of war would be designated as like a military branch. That really may not engage in some of the type of possible bias that, let's say, normal poll workers might engage in, right? Through the very oaths that military personnel will swear when they, put on their uniform, they are swearing in some regards to protect the Constitution, and so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. At the same time, I think the imagery of it is not very good, where you have the military deployed basically at polling sites or voting sites and so on. But at the same time, I do think that we really do have a crisis in this country. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we do have a crisis in this country where a lot of people don't have faith in the integrity of our election systems. And we are a constitutional republic, which depends on us electing our representatives and electing, who's in charge of the country, the president of the United States. If people don't trust in the integrity of the election system, folks, that's the end of our system. And so I do hope, actually, that there is some solution to help remedy the concerns that most people in this country now have, or a lot of people in this country have, around the integrity of our election system. Remember, folks, back in 2016, when Trump was elected, a lot of the same concerns were raised on the Democrat side of the aisle, right? We heard about the rumors that Russia hacked our election going into 2019, even 2020, depending on who said it. We saw many of the mainstream news outlets, the legacy news outlets, published even investigations and investigative videos about even the election machines that were used in the elections. A lot of the concerns that they raised in their own claims and in their own videos were not really addressed in 2020. And so why did all those media outlets just do a 180 on their narrative, going from criticizing these systems, criticizing the laws, to doing a complete 180 and saying it's the most secure election ever, when not only did they not close the gaps that these same organizations and media outlets had raised concerns about previously, not only did they not close those gaps, they actually expanded them when they loosened election protocols in the 2020 elections. Now, how do you go from that, where people are crying wolf for 4 years, saying our election was stolen by Russia, to saying most secure election ever? Because, I mean, honestly, it looks like because their guy got elected, and they don't want to call that into question, right? To saying that anybody who suggests otherwise now, who says what they were saying 4 years ago, is somehow like criminal level, seditionist or something like that. It's a very bizarre shift we've seen, and I think as long as the issue is not being addressed properly, really the faith in our system is in jeopardy. Let's put it that way. And folks, quick note on that too. Seditious speech in the United States is constitutional. This goes all the way back to the time of the founding fathers of the United States, when you had the Alien and Sedition Act, when actually seditious speech was banned temporarily in the United States. It was Thomas Jefferson who overturned that when he was elected president. Thomas Jefferson actually won the seat of the presidency heavily because he again opposed the Alien and Sedition Act. And again, it used to be illegal for a short time in the United States, I think 2 years, to make seditious comments. In other words, to criticize the federal government, to talk about the overthrow of the federal government. That was illegal in the United States for a couple years. Thomas Jefferson overturned that, and U.S. Supreme Courts have since deemed many times that law had been unconstitutional, meaning that even if Trump himself had called for seditious acts on January 6th, which he's being accused of, that is technically legal speech in the United States. That is technically legal speech, protected speech under the Constitution. Actually, if you watch our interview with Alan Dershowitz on Epoch TV, we actually talk about this. So again, one of the important things to know, especially when you're hearing all these, claims and rumors and talks of basically an inquisition to look into the January 6th incident, right? Let's see. This is from Marvelous on Epoch TV. He said, "Hello, Joshua. Is it true that farmers are being paid to destroy their crops?" I've heard rumors of this. I haven't seen proof of it. But there's some weird stuff going on, folks. There's, of course, talk about Bill Gates buying up a lot of the farmland in the United States. Also, the Chinese Communist Party, its own companies, many companies closely tied to the CCP, are buying up our pork farms, buying up our different farms in the U.S. as well. They would have, I would say the CCP would have it in their interest to cause a crisis with this. Remember going back to last year during the time of the lockdowns, when there was a lot of talk about possible food shortages in China. In fact, even evidence of that, even the CCP itself passing laws against, for example, wasting food, right? Remember that? One of the things that happened at that time was that, remember when the pork farms in the U.S., the different butchers in the U.S., the meat packers, were saying there was going to be a meat shortage in the United States? Do you remember when that happened last year? There was all this talk about a possible meat shortage in the United States, and people were kind of panicking and saying, well, do I need to start hoarding meat? like I'm hoarding gas and stuff now, right? Do I need to start hoarding meat? That was basically done away with when Trump declared that these meat packing facilities, the meat distributors, were essential services, and so forced them to basically keep operating. A lot of people on the left were actually very angry about that, saying, how can you compel them to work? You're going to be exposing them to the virus and so on. And actually, it turned out later, it was a few Democrat politicians who started putting pressure on those companies, because it turned out that those meat packing facilities, some of which are owned by the Chinese Communist Party, including some of the biggest ones in the United States, while they were restricting food supplies in the U.S., they were exporting at record amounts to China. And so there's some funny stuff, some real funny business going on with our food in this country. And yes, China does have some of a hand in that. Unclear what the agenda is, if there is one, or the purpose of it is. But there's some really funny business going on right now with our food supplies in the U.S. Next question here. This is from Lisa L. You said, "Hi, Josh. I really like your show. Can you comment," and I appreciate it. You said, "Can you comment on why the Biden administration is discouraging farmers from growing crops and how this might affect our food supply with other countries?" We'll go into that in just a bit. Yeah, now, like I said, there's some funny business going on with food right now, and it's unclear why they're doing this. Logically, there's no clear reason for it. Let's put it that way. You can say that if you go back to the time of the Green New Deal, one thing it actually talked about, right? The Green New Deal, which was a socialist policy for the United States, using green energy as kind of the Trojan horse, essentially, for socialist policy. The Green New Deal, one thing it talked about was getting rid of, I'm not joking here, farting cows, right? Basically restricting the meat industry. We've actually had some interviews on that. You can check out some of what we had on this kind of green socialist agenda. because there is a socialist agenda with it. And part of that does actually include policies that would restrict meat packing, meat distribution in the United States. There is a weird agenda they have against the meat industry. And then you have these billionaires getting behind things like this, miracle meat or whatever they want to call it these days, and bug meat patties and weird things they got going on with that. To the extent actually where Texas had to create a law saying that you can't call things that aren't meat. If it doesn't come from a normal farm animal, it's not meat, right? You can't call bug meat. You can't call plants meat, right? To the extent that they needed to do that. There is some weird stuff going on around this, and so we'll have to see what comes out from it. This is from Cameron Oliver on Epoch TV. Say, hey, Josh, thanks for all you do. Thank you also. Thanks for being here. He said, question on something I haven't heard you touch on much. What are your thoughts of the Great Reset? Thanks. When I first heard about the Great Reset, I thought it was kind of like you hear all these rumors. My stance on a lot of things is I don't really write things off as true or false until I look into them. And so, I tend to categorize things in a space where I don't acknowledge or, toss it aside. I tend to regard things as possibilities until I can confirm them or prove otherwise. I was surprised to find, the Great Reset is actually something they're talking about. And again, it raises concerns. And that's, the World Economic Forum and these different groups talking about things like this. You have these different agendas from the United Nations talking about things like this. You have the Biden administration talking about Build Back Better, which a lot of people associate with the idea of a Great Reset. I can tell you, someone who's been studying communist and revolutionary movements for quite a while now, my big concern is that this is basically an attempt to remake society in pretty much the image of man, which is what really, if you get into the deep books on communism, what they actually talk about, right? It's the remaking of human society. Read, for example, Karl Marx's Das Kapital, where in the beginning he criticizes the companies and the businesses and capitalism and all these things. But in the end of Das Kapital, he's praising these things, which a lot of socialists don't wrap their heads around. Why does Karl Marx go from criticizing manufacturing and criticizing industry to praising it, right? Because what he's criticizing is the system of it that still has traditional culture built into it, the family structure, the family structure, religion, culture, tradition. It's these things that they look to eliminate. They want to basically, if you read Das Kapital, they want to remake all of society in the image of man. That requires destroying the society made in the image of religion, as they see it. Really, that's the heart of these things. And so if you get into this Great Reset, where they're talking about basically starting from a fresh slate and rebuilding society, that's what they're talking about. Whether they call it that or not, that's what they're talking about. And so it's deeply concerning, because it's kind of like they're celebrating the potential realization of this global communist revolution that's been taking place for over 100 years now. This is what it looks like they're trying to be creating and what they're trying to be celebrating. And really, the Green New Deal looks a whole lot like that as well, folks. And a lot of these other programs being pushed out look a whole lot like that as well. This is the next question from MM, also on Epoch TV. He said, Joshua, they are talking about arresting Trump. Do you think they have anything on him, or is it just another witch hunt? I'd say just another witch hunt, to be honest. I mean, they can try. How many times did they try to convict him on things when he was president? How many times did they impeach him? How many times did they try to impeach him? How many false claims did they bring against him? A lot of these things were done against, a lot of these cases they're trying to raise were things done against him when he was president, meaning that he was protected against things like that. They tried doing that while he was president. They don't really have anything solid on him. They've been bypassing normal protocols to even impeach him and things like this. If this were to go to the Supreme Court, they probably wouldn't have ground to do it. And it probably would go to the Supreme Court because he's the former president of the United States. And frankly, I'd say they're wild attacks leading up into 2022 when he's going to be basically backing different politicians. It's not going to help him, folks. Even if they did arrest Trump and put him in the gulag, essentially, right, as a political prisoner, it wouldn't help their movement. It would probably do the opposite. because Trump would be seen as basically like a revolutionary figure if they were to do that. He'd be seen as like a MAGA martyr, essentially, and he'd probably be calling the shots behind the scenes still. It wouldn't serve their interests. This is really, it seems to be the case, an attempt to muzzle him, an attempt to keep him distracted, really through 2022, while again you have the elections that could overturn different seats within the House and the Senate. And where Democrats themselves are even saying that they're probably going to lose at the very least control of the House, because you have redistricting, which Republicans currently have most control over in the United States, and you have a lot of Democrats who are retiring. And so even the Democrats are saying that they're pretty likely going to lose control of the House, if not the Senate. And again, that means that Pelosi is going to possibly lose her power there as well. We'll have to see what happens with it. And so Trump's going to be a big force behind that push, and a lot of people are unhappy about it. I'd put it pretty much with that, right? All right, folks, went a bit further into it. So we're going to jump over to Epoch TV exclusively now, folks. We're going to talk a bit about the virus origins. We're going to talk about the current state of the audits and the election investigations. Folks, if you're not currently on Epoch TV, please check it out. It's epochtv.com/crossroads. And again, your support there helps us keep going, because we're totally demonetized on YouTube, right? We can't keep going if we're just on YouTube. And so I really appreciate your support, folks. For those of you on YouTube, again, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, stay free as always, folks.